Hello, welcome to Nashville Savvy. I'm your host, Megan Lee Fitzidlik from the Pamphleteer. We're coming at you on Monday, April 22nd, and I'm going to rock and roll right into transit because on Friday we had our great Freddie O'Connell transit referendum unveiling. It's going to be known as the How You Move is the name of this program. It's really a dedicated funding program that he's pitching to be on the ballot this November. And we have covered it. Last week we covered it a little bit, but during the unveiling, we got to see exactly what's going to be on the ballot as long as everything goes through with the comptroller. And I wanted to get right into what it is that we're looking at coming down the pipes. For one, it comes at a low payment of $3.1 billion. Just kidding. It's that is the figure. It's not all our tax dollars that are paying for it, though. It comes in a couple different ways. First, I want to explain that this is over a 30-year period is what Freddie O'Connell has said. When you look at the actual documentation, it's pretty indefinite, and I'll explain why some of the things are kind of indefinite as far as how long this will cost us money to get all this stuff up and running. But 2% of the funding will come from the fare fees that you pay to ride the bus. 2% is going to come from state funding. 20% is going to come from federal formula funds and starter funds, like small start funds from the federal government. I'm going to give a brief pause. I'm crackle-lackling. Am I here? G's got me over there. Okay, sweet. 20% from the federal funding. That's kind of like one-time grant matches, especially we have all this funding stuff going on, these funding initiatives for cities and stuff like that going on with the Biden administration right now that Freddie O'Connell wants to take advantage of. 30% is going to come from bond proceeds, and then 46% is going to come from a sales tax surcharge. What is the sales tax surcharge? It's going to be a half a cent tax increase on sales tax in Davidson County. And that half a cent they estimated would cost you about $70 per year. And it would go in effect basically immediately if this passed. It would go into effect as early as February 1st of next year if this passes in November. And they said it would end when all the outstanding debt has been repaid. So it's pretty much we don't know when it would end, but that's the ending window for this half-cent tax increase. I believe, oh gosh, who was it? The former Speaker of the House once of our state once said that, once you allow for a tax, you can't undo what you've done. Once you allow them to tax you for something, you can't take it back. And so some people are weary of that half-cent sales tax surcharge that would be included to pay for this. While we were listening to speakers, I want to go into some of the speakers during this event. So this was at the Southeast Community Center. It was a packed house, and it was a majority of everybody there was obviously in support of this transit plan. He was amongst his people. And who he had speak, when we're talking about how people position themselves, how they put out material, obviously orchestrating this type of public announcement with certain speakers says a lot about the types of people that Freddie O'Connell is trying to get into his camp, the types of people that he wants to create a coalition with to potentially pass this referendum in November. So the types of people that he had speaking are a good indication of who he's pursuing as far as how does he get the votes to pass this in November, because he's trying to get as far away from the Megan Barry transit plan failure as possible, and he really wants this dedicated funding. That is what he's after, is dedicated funding so that he can create a public transit friendly city. So we had a speaker from a union come up who compared, the $70 a year payment to, hey, people are paying $1,000 in car payments a month. this is a drop in the bucket, so to speak. And if you got rid of your car, then think of all the money that you're saving, which isn't necessarily appealing to everybody in Davidson County. So that was an interesting takeaway. We also know that the recurring cost of this is estimated at $111 million per year. So yes, we have to invest in expanding transit and expanding all these initiatives that I will talk about in a second. But there is going to be a recurring cost because once we put these things in place, obviously there's upkeep. You have to keep it going and it costs money. So interesting that it's talking about the sales increase being dependent on when outstanding debts are repaid. What outstanding debts exactly? Because every year we do accrue some upkeep. We keep adding to the tab, so to speak, if we want to keep transit alive in the city once we build it out. So what I'm going to get into, before I get into all of what's in there, the introductory remarks were done by a woman named Lisa Sherman Luna. She's the executive director of Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. She's an immigrant herself. Her opening remarks, this is just very telltale of what demographics Freddie O'Connell is looking at. Look, like so many immigrant families and so many families in Nashville, we were forced to, let me see if I can reset this audio. Does that help? Maybe? Yes. Okay. So like so many immigrant families and so many families in Nashville, we were forced to make tough choices in order to put food on the table and get an education and truly make Nashville our home. Mayor O'Connell's Choose How You Move plan will open up doors and opportunities for immigrant families who are making these tough choices every single day. So that's how Freddie O'Connell opened it. This was who came to speak as the opening of this whole Friday unveiling. We also heard from a WeGo board member. We also heard from a union rep from the Central Labor Council of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. We heard from the president of Nashville's Community College and a citizen from North Nashville. So as far as what we're looking at, that's kind of the makeup of the people that he's really, really pursuing to get behind and help push the positive PR for, I hate to say it like that, but it is part of the plan, is to get this coalition to help move his transit initiative forward. And what we're going to get out of it in a nutshell, we're going to see things like around the clock public transportation and accelerated bus service. So they want quicker pickup drop-off times, because that is a big issue. People are like, it takes me 67% longer. This was a statistic that they threw out, longer to take a bus to somewhere than to just drive. So that's not really an incentive to take the bus, okay? So they want to do this accelerated bus service. They want to do upgrades on 600 or so traffic signals. This would include smart signaling, which would adjust for the traffic patterns in real time. They want to create like this traffic hub where they can actually monitor the flow of traffic and make those signals work more efficiently for the flow of traffic. 86 miles of sidewalks, expanded bus lanes, expanded pedestrian walkways, especially focusing on like this Vision Zero initiative that we've heard about and I've written about if you want to check it out on thepamphleteer.co. And of course, an upgraded and expanded WeGo bus system. So that, in a nutshell, that is what it is. You can find it on the Metro website if you want to look through the entire plan, because there's nuance to a lot of these programs, because we have a lot of transit centers that are going up and stuff like that. We're also going to see funding go towards anti-displacement and equity initiatives. So something that they are looking to do is to acquire land around dozens of these new transit centers to basically put affordable housing in parks near transit. And this was explained by Freddie O'Connell as something that he would do because it would help him lock in some of these federal grants. They need that affordable housing to be around the transit for them to get those grant matches. And then, of course, like I said, the displacement and equity initiatives would go along with funding for those because of how this will change the city as far as putting new bus and transit centers and stuff like that throughout the city. And it does beg the question, are we building a city around transit, or are we improving the city with transit? Because if we're going to just acquire land and then plop a bus station down and then be like, okay, these types of people take the bus to work every day, that's a very interesting approach. I understand that it is because of the federal funding. So that's an incentive by the federal government. This is kind of the stuff that they want to happen in cities. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at that. Another thing that I found, interesting, that happened last week, actually happened in the Metro City Council meeting. And aside from this transportation improvement plan, this dedicated funding that we're going to vote on in November, the council just moved to support the Connect Downtown Action Plan. This is something that's been put together over the last 2 years. It just focuses on downtown transit and pedestrian movement, anything that has to do with transporting yourself from one place to the other downtown. There is supposedly 3 phases that would support this downtown transit initiative. Let me fix my All right. So what we are seeing with the Connect Downtown Action Plan is the 3 phases. They would do improvements on a lot of the same things that the overall transit initiative that Freddie O'Connell is proposing for the entire of Davidson County. This would focus on just the downtown corridor, and it would make smart traffic signal improvements, bus system improvements, intersection improvements, and support initiatives specifically in the new East Bank development area and in Sobro. So trying to build out those places as reliable transit hubs and such. And the interesting thing about this Connect Downtown Action Plan is that it would be funded by individual funding strategies. So this is, this could be grants, federal grants, state grants, whatever local grant money that would go towards some of these initiatives, especially some of this Vision Zero, which is like trying to get to zero pedestrian death initiative. And then we also, in the future, it says that it could also be negotiated to get dedicated funding. So it does have some type of language in this resolution that was passed that would allow for this dedicated funding to potentially fund some of this Connect Downtown Action Plan as well. And the interesting thing is that this is what people who are weary of dedicated funding and dedicating to this huge overhaul of our transit, they're weary of it because they don't see people riding buses. They don't see the incremental improvements to help people get on the bus. They don't see that stuff happening with their tax dollars. So why would we all of a sudden invest all of this money to introduce all of this transit instead of just trying to address the issues at hand? This plan actually does that. It would incorporate the capital allocations from the capital improvements budget, which are negotiated year by year. So if something is working, they would keep funding it. If there's a new idea that they think is worth diving into, they could approve that in the capital improvements budget. And it's just interesting to me that this was approved alongside the TIP, or the transit. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get it wrong. The transit something improvement program. I think that's what it is. If I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. But it's really the how you move is how they're putting it out into, in all their stuff that they put out to the people in the papers and stuff like that. So it's interesting that they're going alongside of one another. They're doing this Connect Downtown Action Plan at the same time as the transit referendum. And it really does come down to dedicated funding. We've talked about this so many times before, so you should look into that a little further. That was like my quick guide to what exactly the transit referendum is going to look like. It still has to be audited by the comptroller, at least the recurring amounts of money, that $111 million per year recurring upkeep of this transit initiative has to be audited by the comptroller, and then it'll be sent to the Metro City Council, and they will vote on whether it will appear on November's ballot. And they seem to have, the support that they need to get it on the November 5th ballot. They had 36 council members weigh in during the process of creating this plan, and majority of them were in there. So actually, you anticipated me well there, G, because I am going to go right into General Assembly. So if you didn't already know, the ESA bill, the expansion plan on school choice, died. It's death. It's final death this morning for certain. This has been in limbo for really a month, but over the last week and a half, it's been going, getting cut from committees and everything. It was in the newspapers. You probably have seen all the tit for tat and the rumors swirling around. And it seemed like that it was on life support, and then it was dead, and then it was revived, and then maybe it would pass, and maybe it's not going to pass. And then the Senate is fighting with the House, but then they're infighting in the Republican Party. And so we've gone through all the emotions with this bill, and now the governor finally came out and he succumbed. He admitted defeat, and he announced that there's no path forward for this ESA expansion in the General Assembly this year. Here's part of what he said on Twitter, or I'm sorry, X. I'm extremely disappointed with the families, or for the families who will have to wait yet another year for the freedom to choose the right education for their child, especially when there is broad agreement that now is the time to bring universal school choice to Tennessee. People are disappointed with education in Tennessee. We have an abysmal literacy rate. People don't feel that the expenditure of funding is being allocated correctly. I just used a lot of big words there. In schools, by school boards, we've seen a lot of uptick in administrative salaries and not a lot of uptick in per student spending and stuff that is focused on the students or the teachers. The state has kind of overhauled this a little bit. By next year, every teacher should be making at least a $50,000 a year salary. And it's interesting that despite allocation of funds that the school board then decides on where it all goes, that has to be taken care of at the state level, because at the local level, these people's salaries haven't been adjusted for cost of living, and sometimes get caught up in the budget season and they don't get that little boost that they deserve. Our teachers are very important people in our society, and I respect all teachers out there. Of course, the teachers' unions did come out against this ESA program. They're afraid of it destroying public schools. They're afraid of there being competition with public schools. We also heard fear of, this trying to usher in some type of weird Christian charter school revolution or something across the state. What it really came down to was this was a proposed solution to the education issue in the state, and allowing a little bit of the free market to help basically better the education for the student, instead of it just bettering the actual institutions that teach your children, and money going to waste. I guess it's really about efficiency when you look at it that way. But in rural community Republicans are weary that this would completely destroy their public school system. They don't have a lot of options out there. And so there was a lot of infighting, not just, it was infighting in the Republican Party. And then, of course, the Democratic Party absolutely wanted nothing to do with this, and the teachers' unions wanted nothing to do with this. So this conversation is far from over, and this is something that the legislature has brought back again and again through the years. We do have an ESA program. It's just a pilot program, and it's in most of the major cities. So when you see places like Nashville coming out against the ESA program, Nashville already implements an ESA pilot program. We already have this in Nashville. So telling other counties that they don't really, they shouldn't have it when we technically already have it is interesting. You see that from council members and other political leaders here in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's really interesting. I'm sure that it kind of will just die and fizzle at this point, because there's not much more to bloviate about, but it was a major blow to the administration, and I'm going to explain why. This was a cornerstone initiative for Governor Lee. And it wasn't his only cornerstone initiative that's failed this year. This and the farmland easement bill were two major initiatives that he wanted in the budget. He wanted to get passed. They were two of his major bills, and they both failed in the General Assembly this year, which is very interesting because it shows a shift in the halls of power. And I did write about that last week as well, if you want to look at it. But just something to keep your eye on. I don't think it necessarily signals that there's a weakening in the supermajority as much as it signals a shift in power in the supermajority, which is Republican in the state of Tennessee. Of course, you're going to hear all sorts of speculation about that across the board as we go forward. And perhaps, as Governor Lee is in his final term, even though he's at the beginning of it, it's interesting because we're also in an election year for the certain legislators and senators. So I think that we're also seeing people weary that they don't want to have to face the ballot box. They don't want to have to face their constituents having voted on this if they don't like it. So we kind of just kick the can down the road as we go into election season. But yes, major blow to the administration there. I also want to talk really briefly before we get to our final femininity, which will be interesting. I'm just a brief conversation about femininity. But before we get there, I did want to point out that we're going to see some interesting stuff this week. A lot of bills were left behind the budget. Behind the budget means that there's no allocation. There's a fiscal note on a bill that's been passed by the committees up until it gets to the Finance Committee. And then the Finance Committee, the budget doesn't have the money in it to pass this bill. So does that make sense? The budget doesn't have the money that this bill has a fiscal note for. So then it's behind the budget. So it's not balanced. And we have seen a couple bills that were assured as they were going through committee that they were going to make it through that are in limbo right now. Specifically the mint bill, not like spearmint, but mint as in legal tender. And that has been, there are two bills, one to create basically the Tennessee mint, which we could then not only make our own coinage out of precious metals, but it would also turn gold, silver, and precious metals into legal tender in the state of Tennessee. But then also we would have a depository in another bill created so that we could have a depository in the state of Tennessee. So those bills were behind the budget, but it did seem like that they were going to make it through. Lieutenant Governor McNally was a co-sponsor on the Senate bill, and Cameron Sexton was a co-sponsor on one of the House bills. And this has been an 8-year struggle that Representative Holsey has been fighting, and same, I know Senator Frank Nestle has too, to kind of turn precious metals into legal tender and create this mint and create this depository in the state of Tennessee. It's just to diversify our investments and not just have them all in stocks and bonds. And it looks like it's been put on the back burner, and we don't know if this is retribution or what happened really. There's all sorts of speculation as to why this suddenly doesn't seem like it's going to make it through. And so that's something that you might want to watch. We don't know what's really going to happen. There's quite a few of these types of bills that are behind the budget now, and we don't know if it's retribution because some of the other bills didn't get passed, and now they're just withholding they're just holding back on some of these bills. It's the internal drama, but I thought that one would interest you guys because creating legal tender with precious metals and legal tender and being able to create our own coins is really interesting and intriguing to somebody like me. So I thought that it might be interesting to some of y'all out there. But we're gonna wrap things up. I'm a little long-winded today, but hopefully I'm not crack-a-lackling anymore. With femininity, and I really just wanted to talk about the war on femininity really briefly because I keep seeing this pop up everywhere, and it angers people from all sides of this argument. It's a highly sensitive subject. We're seeing single-sex bathrooms eliminated, and some of these things are so small and petty, but the incremental is really irritating to people. We're highly sensitive right now because of all the things that have happened over the last 4 years. So we see males who identify as females, they're allowed to participate in female sports. And we see this push against the brainwashing brought on by the feminist movement as well. So you talk about, fourth wave feminism and how it ruined masculinity, or it created some type of rift between female and male in our society. And you also see a type of public shaming that pops up of entitled women. It's become a normal form of entertainment where they shame certain women on programs. And let me finish this before. We're going to make it through, guys. We're going to make it through without the crackles. There we go. And that type of public shaming has become a predominant form of entertainment. And where was I? And as that anger reaches an all-time high, as we're going into a very contentious year too, an election year, I think that it's something that we should address, which is kind of underlying all of this discussion, which is this very real risk of creating a new type of victim mentality kind of taking a new form, where men are victims of the feminist movement and are pushing back, and then women who believe men should lead are victims of this the suppressive nature of the rhetoric that's aimed to embolden and restore masculinity. So lots of victimhood mentality. And I think that the underlying issue is really the dodging of responsibility and responsibility for ourselves. And as we get caught up in this like tit for tat, this is like the quintessential men are from Venus and women, or men are from Mars and women are from Venus argument. And instead of getting all wrapped up in that, I think it's an evasion of self-responsibility. Maybe it's a weird growing pain of a generation that's just confused. We're confused about what's worth living for, what's worth dying for, what's worth defending, and what is worth nurturing. And I think that's what we're really seeing is this struggle. And the struggle really is between faith and dogma. So I just wanted to close on that because I keep seeing it pop up. It's a topic that angers people, especially online. So I don't see it as much in real life, though I have been part of conversations in real life that do, people have very strong stances on this. And this battle between male and female can be really, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it's really draining. And I think it's really more of a struggle between trying to find this purpose, what is worth defending, what is worth nurturing, and how to take responsibility for that. And so that's what I wanted to wrap up on. I wanted to put my 2 cents out there because I feel like it gets heated out in the Twitterverse, Xverse, and beyond. And I don't think that it should eat away at you day by day. I think that we should focus on, the betterment of ourselves. So with that, I hope you guys have a great week. And as always, stay informed.